In 2020, Alabama signed 21 recruits who were ranked as 4-star players or higher, whereas Arkansas only signed 4. When you're a blue chip player and you decide to play for the Crimson Tide, there's a good chance that 1, it's going to take a little while for you to get on the field, and 2, you may never see the field if you don't develop enough. The subject of today's video looked like he was going to be one of those players. After 2 years on campus, he really had not done much for Alabama, and his odds of becoming a first-round draft pick were pretty much 0. That's why he decided to transfer to another SEC school, and will now go down as one of the best players at his position in school history, was a first-team All-American, and will likely be a first-round pick in this year's draft. To me, that's a pretty insane story, and today we're going to be talking about Drew Sanders. We're going to go through how he went from a bench warmer at Alabama to now a first-round pick in this year's draft. In order to do that, though, we first need to go back in time. Growing up, Drew was the son of a football coach and was an offensive player as a kid. He played quarterback, wide receiver, and running back, and his dad said, quote, he wasn't too good at throwing the ball, but was pretty good at running and catching the ball. He ended up falling in love with the game of football, and his dad told a story. He said Drew had brought him a playbook that he had written, and that it was a very good playbook, but he couldn't use it, he said with a laugh. He said that Drew had 20 guys on offense and maybe 3 or 4 on defense, and that from the time that Drew was 5, he could not shake him on any given Saturday. Whether he was going to his office at the school or coach's meetings, Drew would always be there. Football IQ-wise, he learned stuff really quickly and had a passion for it. Eventually, Drew would grow into a big-time football player as he would arrive at Lake Dallas High School his freshman year. His sophomore year, he would go to Heritage High School, and then his junior year, he'd end up at Denton Ryan High School. Why was that? Well, it was because his dad was a high school coach. His dad, Mitch, was a head coach in Oregon for 13 years, coached wide receivers his freshman year at Lake Dallas, was the co-offensive coordinator at Heritage, and then was an assistant at Denton Ryan. Despite playing at 3 different schools, Sanders was a well-known name in the Lone Star State and on the recruiting trail. He quickly became one of the top players in the class of 2020, and as a senior at Ryan High School, he was insane. He caught 34 passes for 717 yards and 12 touchdowns, ran the ball for 326 yards and 10 touchdowns, and completed 7 of 8 passes for 5 touchdowns. On defense, he had 119 tackles, 8 sacks, and had 2 defensive touchdowns. He won district MVP for his efforts and was chosen to play in the Under Armour All-American game. He obviously was a big deal and had a ton of big-time offers, but he committed in the fall of 2017 during his sophomore year. At the time, he was listed as an athlete or a quarterback and chose Oklahoma, saying, quote, they've been around my family a lot and created a family environment for me. I really enjoy going up there, I like what they want to do with me, and I want to play in Lincoln Riley's offense. Sanders did pretty much a bit of everything, as he played receiver, defensive back, and linebacker, but Oklahoma saw him somewhere else. He said, quote, whatever puts me in the best position to play in the NFL. Oklahoma has told me they want me at tight end. They see me as a kind of Mark Andrews or Grant Calcaterra player, and that's what they're looking at me for. Sadly, we'd never get a chance to see if he'd become the next great Oklahoma tight end, as he would eventually reopen his recruitment. In April of 2019, Sanders would flip to Alabama, choosing them over LSU and Oklahoma. Why Bama? He said, quote, it's a championship culture. It's something you want to be a part of, and they've won forever there, and I want to be coached by one of the best coaches. Obviously, Alabama is great for those reasons, but I'm sure he liked the idea of going to the NFL. If you can find your way on the field at Bama, you're more than likely going to get selected high in the NFL draft. Sanders probably saw that, and he had the talent to do so. Bama was getting an extremely good player alongside Will Anderson, as according to 24/7 Sports, Drew Sanders was a 5-star recruit, the number 1 athlete, and the 22nd best player in the class of 2020. So, how did he end up doing at Bama? Before we talk about his Bama and Arkansas career, if you're enjoying the video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe if you love college football content, and turn on notifications so you never miss when I upload. Now let's get back to it. Drew Sanders would arrive at Alabama with a considerable amount of hype because he was a 5-star recruit, but would not get a chance to do a whole lot as a freshman. While he did apparently impress in practice, he only really got to make much of an impact on special teams. He was once named the Special Teams Player of the Week, and his best performance of the season came against Ole Miss, as in that game he had 2 tackles and a 63-48 win. In 2020, he finished with 9 total tackles. Going into 2021, Sanders actually looked primed for a starting role after Christopher Allen would be lost for the entirety of the season in their opening game. That following weekend, he would make his first career start against Mercer, where in that game he would have 2 total tackles. Week 3 was his best performance in an Alabama uniform, as in a win over number 11 Florida, he'd finished with 6 total tackles. Unfortunately, before things could really get going, they fell apart. For a hand injury against Ole Miss, which would open the door for a true freshman to start. That true freshman was named Dallas Turner, who was their next great pass rusher from the 2021 class, and he took over and dominated. This would lead Sanders to having a more reserved role, only playing in 7 games, with 24 tackles, 1 sack, and 2 pass deflections. When he looked at the linebackers around him, he was going to be behind Will Anderson, Dallas Turner, and Chris Braswell, so he decided he was going to enter the portal and try and find a new opportunity. In 2 years at Bama, he finished with 33 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 1 sack, and 4 quarterback hurries in 23 games played. Where would he end up going? Well, most people thought he'd either go to Oklahoma or Texas, but he'd end up picking the Razorbacks over the Longhorns and the Sooners when it was all said and done. Coach Sam Pittman said, quote, "We sweated him going to Oklahoma and going to Texas. Then he called and said he decided to come. He's looking for the right fit and to earn his way into the National Football League. He's everything that's right with the portal." Last spring, Pittman raved about Sanders' potential, as he said he really liked this kid. He's going to be a really good player in the SEC. How would Sanders end up doing? Well, he would do that and then some. Sanders' plan would work to perfection, as in their first game against number 23 Cincinnati, he would register a sack and they'd beat the number 23 ranked Bearcats. Week 2, he would absolutely blow up. He would have 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 1 pass deflection, and 11 total tackles, and a 44-30 win over South Carolina, and then would dominate with 11 more tackles and 2 more sacks against Missouri State. Sanders was off to a hot start with 5 sacks in 3 games, and would have another half sack against Texas A&M. In his return game against Bama, he'd have a career high to that point of 12 tackles and a sack, but they would lose by multiple touchdowns to the Crimson Tide. He'd then have a career high 16 tackles and a loss to Mississippi State, before he'd cool off for the remainder of the season. There's probably a lot of factors as to why that happened, but he was pretty much getting double teamed and schemed around at this point. He'd helped them beat both BYU and Auburn before his 9 tackles and a sack were not enough for them to beat Liberty at home. He'd finished the year strong with 12 tackles against LSU, 10 tackles against Ole Miss, and 7 tackles and a sack and a loss to Missouri. In that time, he'd also have his first career interception and would get himself to 9.5 sacks on the season. He would end up opting out of their bowl game, but finished the year with 103 tackles, 9.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 1 interception, and 5 pass deflections. Sanders had an absolutely insane season and became the first Razorback to become an All-American since Frank Ragnow in 2017. He also became the second Razorback in history to earn multiple SEC Defensive Player of the Week awards, and will go down as one of the better pass rushers in Arkansas history. He finished second in the SEC and 14th in the nation in sacks, and was ready to go on to the NFL. He ended up missing the combine due to an injury, but he would recently dominate at his pro day. He ran a 4.59 40-yard dash, had a 9'10" broad jump, and had a 37-inch vertical leap. Sanders said most of the feedback that he has gotten is that some worry about his experience at the middle linebacker position, but overall, there aren't a lot of concerns to his game. Physically, he fits well at that linebacker spot. He had tremendous production at Arkansas. He played against some of the best competition in the country, has a great football IQ, and his instincts are off the charts. While there definitely are a few things he could improve on, overall the consensus is that Sanders is a top 40 prospect who could hear his name called in the first round. According to NFL Mock Draft Database, currently he's ranked as the 39th overall prospect and has a 26% chance of going in the first round. The consensus is that he'll be taken 42nd overall, and overall, he's probably one of those players that'll go between 20 and 50 in this year's draft, and will start right away for whatever franchise drafts him. Sanders has a tremendous story, and is probably the best example of using the transfer portal. He was a high-ranking recruit who stuck it out for 2 years, but then went to another school with better opportunity and left a legacy there. That is the Drew Sanders story, and I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and until next time, peace.